A top economist is sounding the alarm for the housing market and sending out what he calls a red flare. Plus, we are seeing 1 in 7 pending home sales falling out, which is the highest June on record. We're going to look at that information here in a bit. So let's get into it, you guys. Thank you for joining me. This article by Yahoo Finance is talking about top economist sounds the alarm even louder on the housing market, saying home builders are giving up. So Mark Zandi had put out a article not too long ago sending up a yellow flare for the housing market. And now he is upgrading that to a red flare. He says that's more appropriate for housing just weeks after he sent out this yellow flare. Unless mortgage rates come down substantially, home sales, home building, and prices will slump, he warned. So what's interesting about this is he's very focused on mortgage rates and prices. He's basically saying that even if we have kind of a soft landing in the overall economy, the housing market won't be so lucky. He talks about how existing home sales have had the slowest pace for any May since 2009. Also, sales of new single-family homes sank 13.7% in May from the prior month, and single-family housing starts dropped 4.6% in June, with permits down. Home sales are already uber depressed, but home builders providing rate buydowns has been propping up sales. But he's saying home builders are actually starting to give up. It's too expensive. They're delaying their land purchases from the land banks. New home sales starts and completions will soon fall. So this is all according to Mark Zandi. He's basically saying we don't need any sort of crash for this to be a problem. It already is a problem. He also calls out how we're seeing increased supply. Home listings have been climbing even as homeowners with low pre-pandemic mortgage rates eventually need to put those properties up for sale and buy new homes at higher rates. Conditions are so tepid that many homeowners who listed their properties are taking them off the market after failing to find a buyer at the price they were offering. Delistings are up 35% year to date and 47% year over year in May, outpacing active listing growth of 28.4% and 31.5% respectively. That was according to Realtor.com. He says housing will thus soon be a full-blown headwind to broader economic growth, adding to the growing list of reasons to be worried about the economy's prospects later this year and early next. So not too much of a rosy picture from Mark Zandi. Like I said, he is kind of sounding the alarm at this point. And he's not alone. Analysts at Citi Research issued a similar warning in May. They pointed out that the economist Ed Leamer, who passed away in February, famously published a paper in 2007 that said residential investment is the best leading indicator of an oncoming recession. They talk about how there are fewer permits for single-family home construction, an increase in the effective supply of homes on the market amid weak demand. Median home prices of existing homes were also falling on a monthly basis. So residential fixed investment is the most interest rate sensitive sector in the economy and is now signaling that mortgage rates around 7% are too high to sustain an expansion. So they're kind of calling and blaming a lot of this on rates, saying that that's making it very unaffordable, and that's part of the problem that we're seeing. Now, what's interesting is there was also an article in Housing Wire published by Logan Mohtashami who says housing inventory growth is good for buyers, bad for builders, but he actually references what Mark Zandi's prediction was, how he had talked about the red flares he's seeing in the housing market. And he says, I believe we need to separate the existing home sales market from the new home sales market to know how to understand what's actually going on. And Logan Mohtashami actually has a little bit of a different opinion than Mark Zandi as it relates to the state of the housing market. He says he disagrees with Zandi's take on the existing home market, but he does see eye to eye with him on the builders. So Mohtashami says that existing home sales are not experiencing a crash. In fact, growth in the active inventory is actually a really positive development. And I've talked about this on my channel before and quoted Logan before on this, but the inventory growth, especially of existing homes, is a positive thing because we have been so restricted with the amount of supply for such a long time. But the difference is home builders sell homes as a commodity. commodity. So with inventory building and profit margins falling, they're likely to put the brakes on housing permits. He talks about the home builder confidence data, that's not looking so good. It is actually hovering close to the lows that we experienced during the COVID-19 recession. And this index is focused mostly on smaller home builders, but it helps explain why housing permits are currently so low. He also says that total completed units for sale have gotten to a point where builders have to pull back from construction. He says we're dangerously close to the entire U.S. economy falling into a recession. As I often point out, residential construction workers are a key labor recession trigger. Therefore, getting mortgage rates down towards 6% would not only benefit housing construction, but also keep the private payroll sectors of our economy from more job losses. Now, he talks about how existing home sales are not crashing anymore. We're actually seeing mortgage purchase applications increase, which I've shared for the past couple weeks. That's some data from Mohtashami. Pending home sales are kind of, as he says, healing itself. Since we aren't likely to see 3 to 4% mortgage rates anytime soon, the affordability curve needs to be improved through wage growth, household formation, and slowing price growth. This means the housing market can perform better even if mortgage rates fall to 6%, which is a more realistic target, given that we have reached this level twice in recent years. So overall, Mohtashami says that he agrees with Zandi that higher mortgage rates are creating this strain on the home building sector. And we don't need mortgage rates to drop to 3, 4, or 5% to see some movement. A rate of 6% could actually get a positive response. But where we're at with the Fed right now, it's not likely that that will happen. And the difference in his opinion and Zandi's opinion is that home builders are showing stress, but the existing home sales market is actually working its way back to a healthier environment. Zandi's been saying that buyers are getting squeezed out of the equation here. However, Logan Mohtashami says it's not buyers, it's actually home builders that are kind of the ones struggling in this situation. He says the overall market is really still functioning and things are moving just at a little bit of a slower pace. We're on our way to a healthier market, whereas Mark Zandi is saying the market is frozen and even a soft landing could crash the housing market. So two great sources there with a pretty big difference in opinion on what's going on. Of course, they're looking at this nationally, and we'll take a look at what's going on here in Phoenix a bit more specifically. But let's talk about mortgage rates, because they talked a lot about where we're at today and where we need to be essentially to see some changes in the market. And we haven't had that much movement. So it's kind of not an exciting week this week. We don't have a whole lot of data coming in that could change mortgage rates. So kind of nice to see some stability. I'm in on that. You can see where we're at today, roughly around 6.78% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. We're below 7. We're not as low as we were back at the end of June when we hit 6.67%. As that article was saying, getting closer to 6% will probably have the market moving a little bit more, specifically on the home builder side, but also on the resale side. That would definitely bring up some demand. But I don't know if we'll get there. It doesn't sound like the Fed is too motivated to be cutting rates. I don't think we're seeing a lot of movement in the data in the direction that would have, the Fed take action on that and anything that would really affect mortgage rates to go down that significantly anytime soon. But who knows? We could start to make our way there over time. Now, if you're someone who has been looking to buy a home, but you're not into the 6.75% mortgage rate, no, there is an option for an assumable mortgage where you can assume the seller's mortgage. Now, this isn't for every property, but some properties do allow this. If you're interested in more information about that, you can set up a discovery call with our team or check the description below. We have a link where you can search for homes with assumable mortgages. Now, one of the things the Cromford Report has been calling out is that the closings per month above list price is a really good indicator of the heat in our market, whether we have a hot market or a cold market. And this is something I haven't really looked at in a while because, obviously, we know closings over list price is not going to be a skyrocketing statistic at this point in time. And where we stand today is about 13.4%, but the Cromford Report gives a little bit more context around this, saying that the long-term average between the year 2000 to 2025 is 21.2%. So that's the long-term average. They say we can use this as a benchmark. Again, we're at 13.4%, so we're pretty far below that long-term average. When the percentage is higher than 24%. We declare the market as hot, while below 18 is considered cold. So again, 13.4% is below 18%. We're definitely by the reasoning of this method, we are in a cold market. Now, in the coldest of the cold markets, this percentage has never dropped below 8%. We're not quite there, but we are closer to 8 than we are to 21. So we can see this trend towards the end of 2007, early 2008. I wouldn't anticipate us getting there, but you never know. Now, this is a seasonal measure, they say. So the peak between April and July is usually when we see the highest number, and then we see more of a trough between December and February. That being said, they're saying that where we're at today, we are already past the seasonal peak, which didn't get very high. So they're saying it appears to be heading lower. It's likely that we're going to see this 13.4% continue to go down, which means the market will continue to cool off. What's also interesting is if we go back to July of 2024, so just a year ago, we were at about 17%. So we have yet to make our way back up. We're still kind of on this downward trend as it relates to closings over list price each month. Now, I mentioned we're seeing a lot of pending home sales canceling. According to Redfin, 1 in 7 pending home sales fell through. Let's take a look at that. Before we get there, if any of this is helpful for you, consider subscribing and sharing this with someone who might find it helpful. So according to Redfin, 1 in 7 pending home sales fell through last month. This is the highest June level on record. Now, I know that does sound really scary, but then when we look at their methodology, these are the June records dating back to 2017. So on record, it feels very drastic, but we're only looking back to 2017, albeit we're still seeing 15% of contracts fell through in June, the highest level for this time of year, typically. So I do think that says something. They're saying just over 57,000 home sale agreements nationwide were canceled in June, equal to almost 15% of homes that went under contract that month. That's up from 13.9% a year earlier. So we're definitely seeing an increase in these cancellations. Now, unfortunately, we don't know the reason why all of these are falling through. If it is because of inspection concerns, if it's because of cold feet, if it's financial issues, or it could just be, and they call this out, that buyers have leverage and they may see another home that they like better and cancel during their contingency in order to move forward with another property. We actually are, having a lot of inventory on the market. Buyers actually have choices. And so they may be going forward with something and a new home comes up and they say, oh my gosh, that actually has everything we want. Let's just get out of this one and go forward with the next one. So regardless, it's not a fun experience for sellers, especially if you're in that situation. And at least here in Arizona, buyers have quite a few contingencies that allow them out of the contract if that type of situation occurs. Buyers also have a little bit more leverage, so they're asking for a lot more things during inspection. They may be coming in asking for lower prices and credits and all of that stuff. Very common to be seeing right now in this environment. New listings of U.S. homes fall to the lowest level in nearly 2 years. This is what I was just mentioning, and we are seeing that change here in Phoenix as well. Let's take a look at where we're at with active listings. So we're sitting at about 24,846 today. You can see when we started to make this decline, this was back in the end of May. We saw a little bit of a drop down, leveled off, another drop down. This was at the end of June. And now we're still trending downward. Now, summertime is not really the peak time for sellers to be listing their homes here. And especially if we're looking at luxury, it's a little bit more of like a dead zone during that time. So that is affecting our active listings, but we're definitely seeing sellers kind of backing off, probably. I would imagine some of the optimism has died off for them. And like I said earlier, if you don't really need to sell, you may not be willing to test the market, especially not during the hot summer months. And everyone is traveling, getting ready for school, that kind of thing. It's not very motivational for a seller unless they really actually do need to sell. Now, where we're at with the CMI, 72.7. So we're in a buyer's market. According to the Cromford Report, anything under 90 is considered a buyer's market. Demand is at 75.9, so that is just about 24% below normal. And supply has come down. This was at 108 probably about a month or so ago, and we're at 104 today. So that's only 4.3% above normal for supply and coming down. And our demand has been kind of hovering around this point for a while. So this is putting us in a buyer's market. We have more supply than we have demand. So across the board, a buyer's market. However, every city is a little bit different. We only have really one city that remains in a seller's market, which is Paradise Valley. And that's mainly because their inventory has gone down so much over the summer months, with that mostly being luxury. Chandler just actually went up when we look month over month, and bumped back up into a seller's market ever so slightly at 111.3. Anything over 110 is considered a seller's market. And then we've got a lot of cities in balance, all the way from Fountain Hills down to Mesa. And then our buyer's markets are Gilbert all the way down to Buckeye. Now, what's interesting is the overall change month over month with all of these cities actually was positive this time for this week for the first time in a while. So the trend actually reversed a little bit, moving more in favor of a seller's market than a buyer's market, although it was ever so slight. The change was only 0.4%, but last week we were reporting a negative 0.8%. So we switched to a positive change this week when we look month over month. We'll see if that trend continues. A lot of this is because the inventory is going down. We haven't seen much of an uptick in our demand, but we are seeing the inventory is coming down. So sellers have a little bit less competition. Now, like I mentioned with new construction, builders are having a time out there. They are giving a lot of incentives. They are willing to negotiate, and they are definitely buying down rates and that kind of thing. So if you're a buyer who's been considering buying, new construction could be a really great option for you. We have a list of new construction homes in the description below if you want to check that out. And again, another way to kind of avoid some of these higher rates is that assumable mortgage option as well. More information about that in the description. Thanks for joining me this week, you guys. I will see you next week on my next market update.